In life, we can't always control everything. Especially when things seem to be going smoothly, a sudden moment can change everything. And that's exactly what happened to Leonard, a successful billionaire on a rainy day in the middle of a desolate road. On his way to seal a billion-dollar deal, an unexpected mishap put Leonard in a difficult situation. The tire had blown out. But it wasn't just a flat tire, it was the overwhelming feeling of helplessness as the car wouldn't move, and he was stranded in the pouring rain with no one around. And then, a miracle happened. 3 boys appeared out of nowhere, offering help without asking for anything in return. They didn't need money, nor any favors. They just wanted to help someone in need. What was so special about these 3 boys? And why did such a simple act change the life of a successful man like Leonard? What did he give them in return? Let's reflect on this true story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more daily stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Leonard Hayes, a self-made billionaire, stood at the peak of his career. As the CEO of Hayes Enterprises, a prominent global financial consulting firm, Leonard had led the company to expand its influence worldwide and become one of the leading names in the industry. Despite his financial success, Leonard felt something was missing. Work had taken up most of his time and energy, leaving him little room for personal life or relationships. Today, however, was different. He was preparing for an important conference with Global Tech, a major tech company Leonard and his team had been trying to land for over 2 years. This presentation could decide whether Hayes Enterprises secured a multi-million-dollar contract with Global Tech. The deal wasn't just important for the company, but would solidify Leonard's personal brand. With a contract like that, his reputation would be firmly established, opening up an exciting new chapter in his career. That day, Leonard woke up earlier than usual, feeling excited. After months of preparation, today he would meet with Global Tech, an opportunity he had been waiting for. He drove his shiny black sports car out of the garage, feeling confident and focused. The road he was on was familiar, but today everything felt rushed. The sky remained gloomy, with dark clouds filling the sky, the wind picking up and heavy raindrops starting to fall, as if preparing for a downpour. As the car sped along the deserted road, houses faded from view, and only vast fields and an endless highway remained. Leonard glanced at his watch and noticed he still had plenty of time. He was ready for the most important presentation of his career, but there was one thing bothering him. Despite being fully prepared, he couldn't shake off the feeling of nervousness. Driving past a construction site, Leonard didn't notice the debris scattered on the road. The rain began to intensify, forcing him to focus more on driving. He accelerated, trying to make up for lost time so he could get to the meeting on time. After about 20 minutes, he was still driving along an isolated stretch of road with no houses, just endless fields and the long highway stretching ahead. The silence of the surroundings made him feel as though he had wandered into a foreign land. Meanwhile, the rain kept pouring down, the wind bending the trees and rattling the leaves. Everything seemed to be going fine until a loud hissing sound filled the air. The car suddenly lurched to one side. Leonard quickly pulled over, staring at the flat tire, unable to believe that this was happening at such a critical moment. Leonard stood by the car, holding his phone but realizing there was no signal. The rain kept coming, soaking him, and his frustration was growing. This situation had derailed his entire plan. His car was stuck with a flat tire, on a stretch of road with no one in sight. He glanced at his watch and realized he wouldn't make it to the meeting. His mind raced as he thought about the failure of this appointment, the impact it would have on his company and his business relationships. Standing there, he tapped the steering wheel, trying to stay calm, but couldn't contain his frustration. His entire body felt like it was on fire, the irritation rising as he thought about being late and having to rearrange everything at the last minute. This was truly a bad day, and all he wanted now was for someone to help, or at least tell him where the nearest mechanic was. Just then, 3 teenage boys appeared on bicycles, coming out of the misty rain. They were carrying umbrellas to shield their family's animals from the rain. The boys, dressed in worn-out raincoats with dirt on their clothes, approached the car. The tallest boy, Jasper, saw Leonard standing next to the car looking frustrated and immediately spoke up. "Sir, you need help." Leonard, still in a bad mood, didn't pay much attention to them. He glanced at them briefly and responded coldly. "Do you know where I can find a mechanic around here? Or anyone with a phone?" The boys exchanged glances before answering, "No, we don't, sir." Leonard felt slightly disappointed but didn't think much of it. He kept looking at the flat tire and stood there in the rain, barely acknowledging the boys. However, Jasper didn't stop there. He asked again calmly, "Do you have a spare tire? I can help you change it." Leonard was taken aback. The boy was so confident, and he was surprised that a young kid would offer help. He looked at Jasper for a moment, skeptical, but with no other options, he agreed. "Are you sure you can do this?" Leonard asked. Jasper smiled but didn't answer. He quickly opened the trunk, grabbed the necessary tools, and started working. Kai and Micah helped, one holding the car steady, the other checking the tools. To Leonard's surprise, the boys worked quickly and efficiently. They removed the lug nuts, replaced the tire. It was like they had done this before. Leonard stood there, astonished, realizing that a boy like Jasper could do something so expertly. After finishing, Jasper smiled and explained, "My family's poor, so every summer I work at a garage in town. That's how I learned." Leonard felt a sense of shame rising within him. He had seen the boys as just kids with no experience or knowledge. Yet, in just a few minutes, they had become his saviors, solving a problem he couldn't handle on his own. When the boys refused any payment and wished him a safe drive, Leonard stood still for a moment, watching them ride off in the rain. He felt guilty for having underestimated them. They had helped him selflessly, without expecting anything in return. And in that moment, Leonard realized something important. True kindness doesn't come from power or wealth, but from people like these boys who have big hearts and are willing to help without asking for anything. After the boys left, Leonard remained there, lost in thought. Even though the important presentation was waiting for him, he couldn't shake the image of the boys replacing his tire in the pouring rain, undeterred by the inconvenience. The frustration he had felt earlier had turned into a feeling of shame and awareness about a change happening within him. He realized that for years, he had focused so much on work and material success that he had neglected the simple but meaningful values of kindness and responsibility. These boys, with their modest appearance, had shown him the importance of helping others, even in the toughest of circumstances, something Leonard had forgotten as he climbed the ladder of success. He remembered his younger days, when he used to help people around him without thinking about personal gain. But with his career taking off, he had lost sight of those values. Now, after the boy's act of kindness, Leonard felt as though he was at a crossroads, realizing he needed to change and rediscover his true purpose in life. The feeling of shame and the newfound awareness pushed Leonard to act. He realized that he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He needed to give back to the kindness shown by the 3 boys and the people in their community. Despite the upcoming meeting, Leonard knew he couldn't keep living in the rut he had created for himself. As he drove to the meeting, he made the decision to return to the village and find a way to help the community where the three boys lived. He didn't just want to help the boys, he wanted to do something meaningful, something to show his gratitude. Everything suddenly became clear. Instead of focusing solely on big contracts, Leonard felt that he needed to dedicate time to community projects, where the help didn't just come from money, but from the heart. He began thinking about ways to support the community by improving infrastructure, developing educational programs, and even funding developmental activities for children like Jasper, Kai, and Micah. Leonard decided to reach out to his partners and organizations to bring about positive change for this community. After deciding to return to the village, Leonard drove through the narrow, winding roads, his mind filled with a mix of thoughts and emotions. He didn't just want to thank the three boys who had helped him. He also wanted to do something meaningful for the community they lived in. However, when he arrived, things weren't as easy as he thought. He had no idea where to find the three boys in this vast village. He searched everywhere, asking a few locals, but no one knew who the boys were. Leonard's frustration began to grow. He had promised himself he would do this, but now, facing the reality, he felt lost and disappointed. Every time he passed a small house, he hoped to find the boys, but each time he was disappointed. The frustration built up inside him. Maybe I'll never find them, he thought to himself. But then, a spark of hope flickered and he couldn't give up. Finally, after an hour of searching, Leonard spotted the three boys near a field, chatting and laughing. At that moment, his emotions broke loose. He walked toward them, feeling a great sense of relief. When the boys saw him, they immediately recognized him and smiled warmly. But this time Leonard could sense the deep gratitude in their expressions. Jasper was the first to speak. "Hey, Mr. Leonard, you really surprised us yesterday. We didn't think you'd come back." Leonard felt a lump in his throat. Their words not only touched him, but also made him realize something important that he hadn't thought about before. He smiled, trying to hold back his emotions, and said, "You wouldn't believe it," Leonard began, his voice full of enthusiasm. "Yesterday's presentation almost went horribly wrong. I couldn't focus because I kept thinking about you guys and how you helped me. But in the end, after everything, I still landed the big contract. It's hard to believe." The three boys looked at Leonard, their faces full of surprise and joy. Jasper laughed, teasing him. "So, it's because of us that you got the deal right." Leonard nodded, smiling contentedly. He couldn't help but feel happy when he remembered the moment from the previous day. And now, he wanted to repay the kindness the boys had shown him. "I want to do something for you guys, help out the community here. I've been thinking a lot about what happened yesterday." Leonard looked at the boys with a sincere expression. After a brief pause, he spoke again, his tone growing more serious. "You know, I want to do something meaningful for this community, but I don't know much about this village yet. I've heard a few things from the locals. I've heard the school here is facing some issues with its facilities, and the kids don't have a good environment to learn in. Could you tell me more about it?" The boys exchanged glances for a moment, then Micah spoke up. "You're right, Mr. Leonard. The school really needs repairs. The roof leaks, the walls are cracked, and there's not enough room for all the kids. We can't do anything about it because we don't have the money. Every time it rains, the students have to learn in damp rooms, and the teachers can't teach as well as they'd like." Kai continued, his face sad. "We've always hoped someone would help, but no one ever thought about it. That's why we want to study hard, so we can do something for this school someday." Leonard felt like he had been hit in the face. He knew this was the moment he had to act. He looked at the three boys, his eyes shining with determination. "Well, I'll help you guys. I'll fund the repairs for the school. We'll fix the roof, the walls, and get everything set up so the kids can have a better learning environment." The three boys stared at Leonard in disbelief. Micah, the quietest one, walked closer and asked, "Are you really going to help us, Mr. Leonard? But why help this school?" Leonard smiled gently and replied, "Because I've learned an important lesson from you guys. You helped me without expecting anything in return, and now it's my turn to do something to change this community. We're not just going to fix the school, we're going to change the future for the kids there." The sense of shame that Leonard had felt earlier had completely disappeared. In its place was a deep sense of determination, responsibility, and gratitude for these three boys. He realized that instead of just worrying about contracts and work, he could make a real and meaningful change. Jasper looked at Leonard with bright eyes, then turned to Kai and Micah, smiling. "We can change everything now, right?" The three boys nodded, their faces full of excitement. Leonard looked at them, wondering if he could do something even greater in his life. But one thing he knew for sure was that he had changed, and today's story wouldn't just be a thank you. It would be an action that would help many more people in this community. Suddenly, Leonard was back in the present. He had arrived at the conference venue. Today's presentation was an opportunity Leonard had been preparing for months. He had spent hours planning, researching, preparing documents, and rehearsing with his team. Everything was ready, but his mind just couldn't focus on the task at hand. Ever since meeting the three boys, their image kept popping up in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about them. Three simple boys with kindness and patience that he had never seen in his entire life. It felt like a small revolution inside his heart, disrupting all his priorities, making it impossible to focus on the presentation. As he stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded him, and he tried to pull himself together to begin the presentation. But when he looked at the audience of partners, staff, and executives, Leonard felt like a child about to take an exam, unsure of where to begin. Even when he opened the first slide, his hands trembled and his voice lost its usual confidence. The words he had prepared seemed to slip away. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are presenting a project with great potential," Leonard stammered, his voice faltering despite all his practice. The partners and his staff exchanged confused glances. This was not the Leonard they knew, the one who was always confident, sharp, and persuasive. Leonard's mind still kept returning to the moment when the three boys changed his tire. He couldn't concentrate, and every word he spoke became more disjointed and uncertain. The questions from the partners only made it worse, and he answered in a vague and hesitant manner. Finally, after several minutes of awkward tension, the partners glanced at each other and shook their heads, concluding, "We're not convinced by this proposal. We'll need more time to think it over." The rejection felt like a slap in the face. Leonard felt like he had failed, not just in front of the partners, but also in front of himself. A sense of sadness and helplessness washed over him. This was the conference he had been looking forward to for so long, yet the outcome was a disaster. He felt like he had lost everything. Standing silently for a moment, Leonard looked around, and unexpectedly, he made a decision to do something he had never imagined he would do. He set aside all the prepared documents and began telling a story about the three boys he had met that morning. I'd like to share a story if you don't mind. Today, I met three boys. They weren't rich, they didn't have power or influence, but they helped me when I was in trouble. They changed my tire in the pouring rain without asking for anything in return. And that made me realize that in life, sometimes simple acts of kindness hold more power than all the contracts or deals we chase after. He paused for a moment, looking into the eyes of everyone in the room before continuing. This story is not about me getting flustered during a presentation, but about a lesson I learned today. We focus so much on work, on numbers, on our careers, that we forget that kindness, generosity, and helping each other is what truly brings long-term value. The room fell silent for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, the entire audience started clapping. At first, it was a small applause, but gradually it grew louder, lasting for several moments. No one had expected that a simple story about three boys could change the atmosphere of the meeting so dramatically. The partners exchanged looks, and finally, the head of the group spoke. "We've seen the change in you, Leonard. We're impressed by your story and your decision. We'll sign the contract." At that moment, Leonard felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over him. He hadn't just won in business, he had rediscovered himself. Today's story didn't just help him land the important contract. It had reminded him that sometimes the biggest lessons come from the smallest things in life. Leonard didn't just stop at funding the project. He started a movement to involve the whole community. His vision wasn't just to offer help. He wanted to spark lasting change, not just for the school, but for the entire village. By reaching out to non-profit organizations, philanthropists, and construction firms, Leonard set the foundation for a campaign that would ultimately transform the community. Through his campaign, Together, We Build the Future, Leonard invited everyone to join hands, not only to repair the school, but to restore a sense of hope for future generations. With the support of the community, construction workers began their tasks that summer. The first steps were quick. New roofing was installed, walls were repaired, and classrooms received fresh furniture. There was a sense of renewed hope in the air. Jasper, Kai, and Micah, along with their families, pitched in to help, from cleaning up the site to participating in fundraising activities. The entire community rallied together. The school, once a crumbling building, had now transformed into a vibrant center of learning. The classrooms were equipped, the playground safe and welcoming, and the roof no longer leaked. Jasper, Kai, and Micah, along with their friends, ran around the school, filled with laughter and a newfound sense of hope. Leonard watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. As he observed the kids running and playing, he realized that his efforts had made an undeniable impact, not just on the school, but on the spirit of the entire community. People who had once been indifferent to their environment now worked together, strengthening the bonds of trust and cooperation among them. It wasn't just a school that had been rebuilt. A community had been revitalized. This wasn't just a physical transformation. It was a transformation of the people within it. Leonard's heart swelled with fulfillment as he drove away from the village. The story of those three boys and their dilapidated school had taught him a profound lesson. True change in life doesn't always come from big business deals, but from small, meaningful actions that make a real difference. It was their generosity that had helped him understand that the true value of life isn't in what we gain, but in what we give. As he drove away, Leonard realized that, for the first time in years, he had found a new purpose. The success of his business didn't compare to the fulfillment he felt from giving back to a community that needed it the most. The lesson he had learned from the boys was simple, yet life-changing: generosity, kindness, and giving without expecting anything in return were the real measures of success. When he looked back at the now bustling, thriving school, Leonard knew that the best projects weren't always the ones with the biggest contracts, but the ones that touched people's lives. And for him, this was the project that mattered most.